I would love the listeners and organizations to understand that focusing on the language output is not going to give the engagement they're looking for, because it's not going to get the audience to understand what they want to do. Language is not the connection. Engagement is the connection. It needs to be well-rounded, the well-rounded reasoning of why you're translating or using language output, and making sure that we plan it well and then execute it well of how we are delivering that message to the community.
Welcome to Content Matters, the podcast where we go behind the scenes of high-stakes content. I'm joined with Henrietta Podgorska, Head of Operations at Multilingual Australia and an independent consultant. For more than 10 years, Henrietta has been advocating for better multicultural communication and engagement. And she's seen firsthand how so many people can get this wrong. In this conversation, we're here to unpack why translation just isn't enough on its own, what true inclusion really looks like in good communication, as well as 3 questions that every organisation should ask before they hit publish. Henrietta, how are you?
Thank you so much, Natalie. So good to be here. Thank you for having me on this show.
I'd love to ask something that you said to me earlier, really stuck with me. Organisations trying to appeal or engage multicultural audiences, I think their job is done when they just use Google Translate. Is this good enough? And if it's not, why not?
I wish organizations, because I know they're wanting to do the right thing, especially non-for-profits. We are there to make a difference. We live by our passion, live by our values of making a difference. But I think sometimes we just rush thinking we're doing the right thing, but sometimes it's more damage than not. One thing I would love the listeners and organizations to understand, that focusing on the language output is not going to give the engagement they're looking for, because is not going to get the audience to understand what they want to do. Language is not the connection. Engagement is the connection. It needs to be well-rounded, the well-rounded reasoning of why you're translating or using language output, and making sure that we plan it well and then execute it well of how we are delivering that message to the communities. How many of your listeners may have translated materials dusting on their shelves? Next time there's an opportunity to translate, I heard it myself around the table saying, we did that before, but look how much printout was wasted. For me, it's heartbreaking, because 99% of the communities whose languages are dusting on those shelves never heard about the organization, neither the mission or services. It never got to them, yet it's the communities who get blamed instead of the systems or the way or the frameworks we are using to utilize translation. Now, translation and interpreting is a tool. It should not be people's strategy. And again, just having those small mind shifts hopefully will help organizations to better plan and to better execute some of these communication and engagement strategies.
So I think you alluded to it, but in addition to just relying on Google Translate, what are some of the other mistakes and examples where it's just not good enough? What else could they be doing?
I think that's why I am advocating when it comes to translation interpreting. That's definitely the beginning of the inclusion, but it's not the destination. It has to happen a pre-consultation and then the post-delivery section as well. Often what's happening is, well, we came up with this idea, we have a very fancy flyer, let's translate it as is to another language. For example, in home care and aged care, where I worked at, consumer-directed care or home care packages, these words could be meaningless in other languages or could alienate people from engaging the services, because we have not asked these communities how they are communicating about this issue, what language they are using. We are not talking at them. We just translated monolingual and monocultural Australian ideas to another language without the context. And trust me, it can go really wrong, especially when it comes to those more complex issues such as dementia, where you're not just dealing with mistranslation, but often very negative stereotypes about the disease.
Can you give us an example of a situation you've been in where you've been up against someone really defensive about them just doing good enough?
Yeah, so I had a couple of examples of that, but I think one of my fortes is to work people to drop that defensiveness because I know the deep heart is just they are hurting that they have not done the right thing in the first place. Often and not when it's a little bit too late when I step in, get a way where we can actually deliver those messages to the communities. But again, I was around a table and it was one of the city councils. They are doing God's work, especially the community development and engagement teams. But I did highlight that you have translated this. It looks really good. But how are you going to get to the communities? And they did not felt like that was their role. And they come on very defensive of, well, we translated it. They should know. Sometimes even they should speak English comes out in certain conversations, which I am absolutely gobsmacked that you still can hear those words in the 2020s. There were some conversations where it's really highlighted to me how long we have to go. I think it comes down to not just for the councils or non-for-profits, it comes down to that anything to do with multicultural and multilingual engagement or strategy still goes down to compliance. Are we complying with this? Are we tick the box, everything, and then moving on? There is not necessarily a plan. I had CEOs that I was talking to when I wanted to engage and making sure that they are doing the right thing before we refer any clients to them. Do you have any multicultural strategy? Do you have any multicultural plan? The CEO said, Henny, I know this is not a priority for my board. And again, if you're not a priority, you are going to be swept under the rug. It's not going to be attention to details and attention to making sure that is an actual outcome. Because I can ask any organization that ever done translation, so how many of them was utilized by the community and what was the outcome? Nobody could tell me so far because they're not monitoring that either. If you're monitoring your output, then for the translation interpreting, you will know who is reaching it and how you get to them. But because that's not happening, you're not going to have the data either.
How does it make you feel when you talk to some people who are just doing a tick box exercise and they turn around and say, well, they should speak English?
Yeah, we had this discussion with an organization and they had a brand new website for a brand new program that they just got funded. So obviously a lot of excitement in the room. They have developed a website and it looks really good. It is an issue. If you have, you can call that number and you have the website to explain the context. Really great, right? So I said to them, cool, do you have this in other languages? This is something that impacts all across the board. And they were got defensive. If you're defensive, you probably forgot to do this step in regards to community engagement. This is not an inbuilt framework into the program delivery or design. They said, well, they can just use on their phone Google Translate. And I was like, two questions there. First of all, who is going to be your target audience and which communities? And how do you know that they have this level of technological skills? Because if you miss that, nobody is going to Google Translate your website. You miss the mark to communicate with a large group of people who experience this issue. You're just putting the pressure on them. They can't use Google Translate. I do recommend sometimes because they are just so far into delivering a project. And I said, well, we can't ask that question on different languages because we will not know what they are answering. And I'm like, well, then use Google Translate because for me, I don't care. My role is to build that bridge and get at least one word from that community so their voices are heard. I want to make sure that it's happening. And yes, on that moment, I was like, well, use Google Translate, right? And they said, no, Henny, it's not reliable enough. So I have providers who want to get out of their responsibility and just say, oh, they can Google Translate, assuming these communities will not need additional help. On the other hand, in another table, Google Translate is all of a sudden not a good option. We need to make up our mind. We need to educate ourselves. What is Google Translate? It is a tool, but unfortunately, without qualified translators and context, you're going to go really bad with that. It's an emergency tool. I have to give another example. I'm sorry, I'm rambling as well. We went to a conference and we heard about the emergency procedures. I was listening to a professor working in an emergency response team. They actually discussed that the AI translation was actually appreciated by the people because they knew that your intention was to quickly get that information, even if it was not necessarily well translated. And he has a really good example of how badly that translation can go. But at least the people appreciated the need that this information needed to be on the go. So again, making sure there is massive amount of thought behind utilizing these tools and as well as plan and framework. I could pull about anybody's translated material. I pick a side, pick a translator and I can go and ask 3 questions and I will know if these people have planned this well or it was delivered well, because I know the 2 big things that are often missing. That's why we are wasting translations on our websites.
Henrietta, you're clearly so passionate about this topic.
Very, very.
Some of the key takeaways you've just shared is that you're often up against people who think Google Translate's good enough, but then you're also up against those who say it's not good enough, and then what solution is there? There's an expectation we need to address that we don't know for sure that people or these communities understand how to use Google Translate. So sure, it could be a silver bullet, but that's the first thing to consider. In an emergency situation, you're absolutely right. There are ways that we need to tackle this better. For the benefit of our listeners, do you want to share what's at stake when communities aren't able to access information the way that really resonates with them? They're only maybe just scratching the surface based on a plain translation.
When it comes to a lot of the systems that they have in Australia, and that includes the HK system as well, we need to make sure we understand where communities are coming from. You can't just translate information about the HK system and just hoping it's gonna land. A lot of the cultures and communities and migrants especially, they came from a country where HK looks very different. Using just verbatim translation will not necessarily get the result. Now, some industries and some areas in life, I keep telling them, you are so lucky. I had a conversation with the State Library of the VA. I said, you are such a good point, because library, everybody knows what library is. You know, every culture has it. You have such a strong foundation for translation because you don't have to explain what's in a library. What you do have to explain later on is the additional services that some of those libraries may provide. Libraries are changing. Libraries got a little louder, a little more diverse. So it's just some of those additional things that you need to explain. But the core foundation and service provision, you don't have to. It really depends on the industry. Knowing your industry, having conversations with your clients so you know what their assumptions and concepts are, will help you have a better experience when translating information about your organization or the industry. You have to have those conversations. So pre-planning these translation or the interpreting sites, so when you go out and present to communities, is critical, because you may unintentionally cause distress to the communities.
You've touched on some good points, and I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into the tactical. You've mentioned that organizations need to be doing better pre and post translation. Can you talk to me a bit more about what pre and post means and what that actually looks like to you?
Pre is about making sure you know why you're doing the translation and have your intentions set right. If your intention is just to inform, sure, translate and hope for the best. But your intention is to connect, then you need to engage. For me, making sure that the pre-section is also about community engagement. And sometimes I know organizations think, who has the money? Please plan your tenders better. Please plan your budgets better for you in your program so you can do those kind of engagements. Or build your network of experts like me or some of your staff. If you look around, Australia is more and more diverse. The workforce is extremely diverse. Who are the people in your organization that can lead to certain cultures? Please do this respectfully and with the approval of your staff members. For example, what I have done in Umbrella is embedded into the workwear strategy. So we know I'm wearing my Hungarian outfit today. I'm from Hungary. And I put it in there that there will be events where we encourage our staff to wear their traditional dresses. You have the right to refuse that. We would be honored if you feel pride to showcase your culture. 99.99% of the time, our staff showed up in their cultural dresses. I gave the power to them. It's your choice, and we would be honored to share your culture and link it with our organization. Working with that cultural awareness and approaching your team and staff and build a little bit of even a committee, multicultural engagement committee, get some of your staff involved, give them feedback about the translation, get them involved if they want to. 99.9% of the time, fellow multicultural and migrant communities, we know well because we are very passionate about our communities. I just want to make sure that the organization understands that is resource and skills and talent. So please appreciate that you have people who can go above and beyond what they're requiring to do at your organization. That should be always at least appreciated and thanked for.
Great. And so what are some of the post activities that organizations should be implementing?
Post ones, definitely linked to the pre. Once you establish your connections, know which organization. Data will be very important in the beginning because you don't have unlimited money and funding to deliver information to engage with communities. When it comes to picking your communities for translation, look at location, look at age. I had this experience when I was delivering information about the HK system. Very lovely city councils. Again, I love you all. But they came back because I asked them, can you please give me data so I can see what language I will need to bring? They sent me the languages and I looked it up. And Afrikaans, for example, was very popular in this particular city council. But there were no people who speak Afrikaans above 55 plus. So it's just about making sure that whatever you do, you know your location, the age group, and who are going to need this information. Triangulate that, and you will be able to find that language. Then once you have that, making sure that you're engaging with the communities and either handing it to them, delivering it to them, or connecting with them. This is why the two things has to link. So it's depending on the organization capacity, depending on your reach. It can be so many things that you can do. It's all about how I'm going to get this information to the communities. One of my biggest ick when it comes to this is, well, they just don't want it. How do you know they don't want it? Have you actually talked to them? Have you actually engaged? Have you physically handed it to them? If you have not, then clearly you haven't done engagement, meaning that your translation could be alienating people or it's just not relevant culturally, context-wise. So it's so important that we see translation, not the destination, but the tool to get to the destination. And everything around it is about strengthening that engagement with the communities, because you will have tenfold benefits, not from that one translation, but that you're gaining the trust and respect of this community, meaning they could come back more.
You mentioned around why not engage, like why not ask, has anybody read it? So how can you measure that? Can you give us a quick list of 5 things? So is it running community groups? Is it sending out surveys? Is it measuring likes on social media?
It will depend on the organization and how they are currently measuring. A lot of other things get uncovered. For example, realizing that we have actually not measured anything to do with diversity when it comes to our intake and processes. Are you measuring what is the language background of the new assessments or the new intake or the new clients? Are you measuring the cultural background of the new client, of the new staff? It's making sure that you have your baseline measurement of cultural and linguistic diversity done. A lot of people don't even know if they have or how many they have, especially for staff, when you look at like your intentions. So when I applied for a job and I worked in different departments, work in different organizations, my language and culture were always in the diversity and inclusion section. Nothing wrong with that. We need to make sure that we're measuring that diversity, but I feel like my language is a skill. I have seen intake forms and employment forms, which I was very happy, where the question was, what is your communication skills? And that's when language was mentioned. Culture, yes, because what will be your needs, for example, when it comes to some of your cultural events, when you take break and so forth. But language, if it could be separated out to your skill set, that would be also really, really great. So making sure that your forms are inclusive, making sure that your forms are labeling language right, make sure that you collect the data to begin with. How many flyers you have, make sure that your website can track the downloads. You have so many translated stuff on your website. How many people download them? I know website can measure this because I have built website before, but the people who needed to know this, who are making those decisions, could not answer me that question. It's just showcasing to me that was not an important matrix when it comes to that reporting. If you're not able to measure diversity with your baseline processes, I'm not sure if you were able to measure a one-off translation project's impact in the community.
I'd love to ask, Henrietta, who have you seen do this really well? I know there are some organizations who must get this right.
There are a lot of organizations, for example, Dementia Australia, one of the main ones that I'm always very happy to talk about because they have incredible extensive translation materials. We engage with them to improve on the context of that translation. They have acted on that and they're doing some incredible work in the communities to make sure that it's reached to them. For every moment I was engaging with them, we know who is the expert. It was incredible respect. I felt felt that we are equals. They know, those guys are incredible experts of dementia.
What did that project with Dementia Australia involve?
So they wanted to engage more with multicultural communities, and we had a discussion of how that can be done. We had the amazing 45 minutes translated or interpreted, depending on the communities, slides about dementia. And the other 45 minutes was we asked 4 questions. One of the questions was, what is the word that you use? Then how do you talk about the disease? Where do you get the information when you need this information? Where do you go to? And so the help-seeking behavior of certain communities. And it was an incredible diverse response that I think all of us like a little bit blown away. The first question was probably the most interesting one because we found that there were 3 communities. One that had dementia. They needed more information around how they can make their communities more dementia friendly. For example, the Bulgarian and the Macedonian community, they wanted to make sure that they have the right steps, that they had the right toilets, the right signage. And Dementia Australia already had a booklet where you can make your communities more dementia friendly. So it was more around engaging with that particular booklet for them. The second one was a very diverse group where you had, yes, they had the word for dementia, but that's not what most people used for the disease. I think it was peeling onion. That was dementia because you're losing yourself layer by layer. And then the third group was very interesting because they are the one who only used the derogatory term. So the only word that they used was something to do with people being idiot or losing themselves. It was very negative and stereotypical wording around dementia, not even using the word dementia at all. Uncovering that with the communities was one of the biggest empowerment moment of my career, especially the Hindi-speaking community. If you know anything about the Indian culture, is that for them, family is saint, you know? And all of a sudden, that cultural value, very strongly embedded cultural value, came swinging into their face when we translated back the word they used. And like, so you're calling your mom crazy? How does that feel? And they were like, I haven't even thought about this. When we used the translation reversed, the word sounded so cruel, so bad. And the communities came to the realization of what are we doing? That was such a great way of demonstrating that interpreting and translation is a bridge, language is a bridge, and you can use English and the other language interchangeably to make sure we all come to the same conclusion when it comes to this particular issue.
In a previous conversation, you've mentioned things you've seen that work well. One organisation that came up was the Department of Fire and Emergency Services in WA. Can you remind me, what did they do differently to build trust?
I think because of the co-delivering those emergency preparedness with communities and having a very strong community engagement aspect, they are not out there to inform, they are out there to connect and engage. And that's one of the good examples for that. The DFS doing a really good job because we know, especially from the East Coast, the communities, multicultural communities left us last when it comes to emergency communication. So they drafted different messages as well as preparedness. If you're prepared, you can respond to an emergency. But if you don't know and you are not prepared, then this is where a lot can go wrong. I had the privilege to listen to the DFS and some of their presentation, and they went out to different communities. They made sure that they engaged the right translation provider. They made sure that those communities understand and receive the information, and going back and continue to engage with those communities, especially the ones that are at risk in regional areas when it comes to fire and floods. Very similar to Dementia Australia. It's just that care. You can see that they care, and I can tell if people don't care, they just translated something for the sake of translation. Communities will know and respond accordingly. When I see there is a synergy, I think that's beautiful. That's when interpreting and translation will be your best tool in delivering your key message to these communities. And the DFS is one of the other local heroes doing it really well.
Have you ever personally had someone come up to you, Henrietta, and say, you know, you've really changed my life because now I can better explain the concept of aged care or dementia with my mother or my father?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's Really great. Guess what? We have a seniors group now. Guess what? This person engaged and got the right services now. Thank you so much. I love that feedback because that means that the communication, engagement, and care we showed to these communities had an impact on the people. And I know for a fact that they are not going to be afraid of the services anymore and they're going to tell their friends who to go to. So it is a little bit of a chain event as well. I'm very blessed and honored to say that the last 10 years I had multiple engagement from communities, but as well as service providers, where they came back to me and said, guess what, Henny, we're not just going to translate this time. And I'm like, yay! I had this one conversation with a department that they'd done a survey for multicultural engagement. I said, good survey, but it's only in English. Like, it's for a multicultural plan. And we went back and forth. There was a lot of yes, but, and then there was obviously a response back of why not. For me, defensiveness means that there was no pre-planning, there was no thought put into it, there's lack of care. But because I was gently pushing them, do you want to know this particular issue, this particular system is in every single country? Won't you want to know? Perfect, 190 countries represented or 200 plus languages. Wouldn't you want to know how other countries do this well or worse? This knowledge that you have and you don't even want to engage with it. And they were like, oh, that's a good point, Henrietta. You know what? Unfortunately, we can't do nothing with it, but I'm going to make sure that we build this into a multicultural action plan. And I'm like, thank you. Do better next time. For me, that's just as equally satisfying when people realizing that they have done wrong, they have not planned properly, and we start on some incredible values that these communities can provide. For example, if you are in education or transport or healthcare, you could learn how healthcare, education, or transport looks like in other countries and learn the positives and negatives. And you have case studies on your doorstep, and we are not utilizing it and we're not learning from it because we are afraid to engage. So I think that's some of the examples that I could give you there.
If someone is listening, what's one thing you'd want them to do tomorrow?
That's a good question because I like action-oriented questions. I think it's really important that if you have not done anything in this field, have not engaged, I would love you to set a goal. We have 200 plus languages, 190 countries represented just in WA, and that's an incredible diversity that I fully understand can be overwhelming. But what I ask you to do is maybe pick 5 communities for 2026. 5 communities that you make the commitment to know more, to engage more, and to hear their voices. You have data you have available from all sorts of sources. If you have your multicultural department in your state, go there and look it up. Who are the communities for your age range and location who are going to be your target groups for the particular issues, matters, or mission and vision that you need to deliver for your organization? Make sure that you do 5 communities in 2026. You can start preparation now with the data and just make sure that you have intentionally put that out. Do a vision board, put up the countries, start learning, to be curious about it. Don't forget to learn, don't forget to open up, don't forget to admit that you have done mistakes, because communities are open and honest about it. Pick 5 communities that you're honestly going to engage next year. That does not mean translation and interpreting. If you're successful, you will learn a lot of things. And if you were successful, the year after, do another 5. So you're slowly building up your capacity to engage with more communities in a meaningful way.
I really like what you said before around starting to build a culture from the ground up internally as well, encouraging people to wear their traditional dress at work. Are there any other ways that you can suggest that people encourage more culturally diverse workplaces?
I want to say that one of my problems with the cultural awareness trainings is that it's one-off and then people go off and they not necessarily practice. Cultural awareness is a lifelong skill set that you need to nurture. And making sure that your organization doesn't see diversity as a compliance issue, because often or not it does. How you would know is that you do not have, for example, as I mentioned about our work outfits, making sure that people know it's their choice, and the way you're wording, the way you're making sure that you celebrate people's culture. Having photos for your social media is really important, but just to make sure that it's meaningful for the staff as well. And also you're providing them the flexibility. Ramadan is a very important time for Muslim communities. Provide flexibility for your team and staff who are from that particular background, because then they will come and trust me, they will celebrate you. It's a give and take. You don't just take people's culture and language and use it for your marketing. I can see when it's honestly done and when it's not. Communities will know too. So they can pick up fakery very easily.
I think You've shared so much with us today, Henrietta, and with so much liveliness as well. I know that you've shared the one thing that someone can start with tomorrow, but in general, if there's one principle you think that every culturally aware and mindful person should live by, how might you sum it up?
I would go back to the beginning. If your intention is to inform, then translate. If your intention is to connect, engage. Translation is a tool, not your destination. What they can do, and it's not just the one thing or start tomorrow because it needs to have the right context when it comes to service delivery. Make sure that you have a community impact question for the briefing for your projects. Who needs this and how we will know that they understood it? That's your question to ask before you go into that translate, because those are the two things we need to consider, not just shooting into the dark, because translation is and interpreting is not cheap. And we cannot waste such a precious resource. Often I feel like we just tick boxing and the intention is not behind and we're losing money. And then people get disencouraged to do interpreting or translation again because they have not seen this. But if you ask and put that responsibility back on yourself of what can you do and know who needs this and how you will know that they got it, answer that two questions. And I'm hoping that you will have a better outcome when it comes to your project. That's the one thing that could be changed in the long run is putting that responsibility back on us. The communities often don't even know that you translated something. And why would they? They have their own lives. So it's your responsibility. Don't blame the communities. Ask yourself those questions and be curious. It's a beautiful, diverse Australia out there that every single day I'm honored to engage with and learn something. And they make me excited for what I do because they should be the true inspiration behind everything we do around this communication matter.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Do you have any final words before we wrap up?
I think just a little bit of if it's translated, it's inclusive. That's a big myth. I really want to make sure that inclusion is about the relationship that you have with your communities. It's not about the language output. So please respect. And again, be curious. You will gain so much from doing the engagement for yourself and for the communities too.
Thank you, Henrietta. Where can people find out more or learn about you?
Please visit my LinkedIn. It's my name, Henrietta Podgorska. I often post about different issues that matters to the communities or to service providers, and they can reach me there. So my contact details are on my page. I would absolutely love to hear. Please send me a message. Happy to have a conversation about your pressing issues of translation. I'm encouraged to check on Natalie and her work because it's very inspiring too.
Thank you, Henrietta. All right, wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.